In the vast story of American coinage, there is a coin that carries the weight of a nation's history, its economic struggles, its artistic ambitions, and its place in the pocket of nearly every citizen. This coin is the Jefferson Nickel, and the year 1972 marked an important chapter in its long journey. The Jefferson Nickel, first introduced in 1938, was designed to honor Thomas Jefferson, the third President of the United States and the principal author of the Declaration of Independence. When the coin entered circulation, it replaced the Buffalo nickel, which had been in use since 1913. The new design was created by sculptor Felix Schlag, whose work was chosen after a public competition and featured the familiar portrait of Jefferson. On the obverse, while the reverse displayed his Virginia home, Monticello, a neoclassical architectural masterpiece that stood as a symbol of Jefferson's vision for America. By the time the 1972 nickel was struck, the coin had already become a staple of American life. It was produced in massive quantities at the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints, and while many people think of it simply as pocket change, numismatists and historians recognize it as a tangible artifact that captures the economic climate of the early 1970s. The year 1972 was a turbulent one in American history. The Vietnam War was ongoing. The Watergate scandal was beginning to unfold, and the United States economy was experiencing high inflation, which had a direct impact on coinage and currency in circulation. Every coin minted that year, including the Jefferson Nickel, carried with it the echoes of those national challenges. The Philadelphia Mint produced over 217 million nickels in 1972. The Denver Mint produced over 351 million, and the San Francisco Mint struck more than 150 million proofs, and circulation strikes combined. These figures show just how necessary and heavily used this coin was in everyday life. But beyond sheer numbers, the 1972 Jefferson Nickel has become a subject of fascination for collectors because of its varieties errors and its context in the broader numismatic landscape. While the coin was composed of 75% copper and 25% nickel, just like previous years, it was part of a generation of coins that reflected the economic pressures of the time. Since the removal of silver from most U.S. coins in the mid-1960s, collectors and the general public were still adjusting to a coinage system based on base metals alone. The design of the 1972 Jefferson Nickel, while seemingly ordinary, also carries subtle details that make it distinct. Schlag's portrait of Jefferson faces left his stern gaze reflecting the idealism of the founding father, but also hinting at the struggles of the modern nation. Monticello on the reverse is rendered with precision, but in 1972 the dies sometimes wore quickly, leading to weak strikes and blurred details. This is why many circulated nickels from that year show only faint details on the steps of Monticello, an area that would later become a major point of interest for collectors who seek the so-called full-step nickels. The concept of full steps refers to the number of distinct steps visible at the base of Monticello. When a nickel is struck fully and sharply, 5 or 6 full steps can be clearly seen. This detail might seem minor, but it is a hallmark of strike quality, and 1972 nickels with full steps are far rarer than typical strikes, making them highly desirable in the numismatic market. Beyond strike quality, 1972 nickels are also notable for certain die varieties, one of the most famous being doubled. Dies doubled. Die obverse coins occur when the hubbing process misaligns the design elements, leading to noticeable doubling on the letters or numbers. In 1972, nickels with doubling in the inscriptions such as, "In God We Trust Liberty," or the date are prized by collectors and can be worth many multiples of their face value error. Coins also play a crucial role in the story of the 1972 Jefferson Nickel, with examples of off-center strikes, clipped planchets, die cracks, and other minting anomalies. Each of these errors provides a glimpse into the minting process of the era and reflects both the immense production demands placed on the mints and the imperfections inherent in a system that was still largely mechanical rather than computerized. But to truly understand the 1972 Jefferson Nickel, we must also step back And consider the cultural and economic environment of the United States. At that time, in 1972, Richard Nixon was re-elected as president, but his administration was already under the shadow of Watergate. The country was deeply divided over the war in Vietnam, and inflation was eroding the purchasing power of everyday Americans. A nickel still bought a small snack or paid for part of a phone call, yet its value was diminishing compared to previous decades. The Jefferson Nickel, in this sense, represents both continuity and change. It carried forward a design that had become iconic, yet it circulated in a nation that was rapidly transforming in technology, culture, and politics. Jefferson himself, a man of contradictions who believed in liberty, yet owned slaves, who championed small government, yet expanded federal power through the Louisiana Purchase, seemed an apt figure to grace America's 5-cent piece during such a conflicted era. When we examine the 1972 Jefferson Nickel, we are not merely looking at a coin. We are exploring the intersection of history, economics, and artistry. It is a story of mass production, yet individual uniqueness. Every coin tells its own story, whether through the hands it passed, the errors it carries, or the clarity of its strike. And for collectors, the hunt for a pristine full step. 1972 nickel, or a rare double die variety, becomes a quest for connecting with that larger history over the decades since its minting. The 1972 nickel has remained common in circulation, though examples in mint state or proof condition have become prized possessions in numismatic circles. Grading services such as PCGS and NGC evaluate these coins carefully, with high-grade full-step examples commanding hundreds or even thousands of dollars depending on their rarity and demand. This journey from an everyday coin to a collectible artifact highlights the importance of even the most ordinary seeming pieces of money coins like the 1972 Jefferson Nickel. Remind us that history is not only recorded in books and monuments, but also in the small metallic tokens we carry in our pockets. They are democratic objects accessible to everyone, yet full of meaning for those who look closer. And so the 1972 Jefferson Nickel stands today as more than just 5 cents. It is a window into the America of the early 1970s, a nation grappling with war, scandal, inflation, and cultural upheaval, yet still rooted in the ideals of its founders, a nation where, even in the smallest coin, we can find echoes of its triumphs and struggles, its creativity and imperfections, its continuity and change. When you hold a Jefferson Nickel from 1972, you may see nothing more than a small round piece of metal yet hidden. Within this ordinary coin lies an extraordinary story, a story that connects the founding ideals of the United States with the struggles of the 20th century. A story that blends artistry, politics, economics, and human ambition into one enduring object. The Jefferson Nickel has been with Americans since 1938, replacing the proud Buffalo nickel that had circulated since 1913. When the Treasury called for a new design in the late 1930s, it was an attempt to honor one of the most influential figures in American history, Thomas Jefferson, the man who penned the Declaration of Independence, who served as president, who doubled the size of the United States through the Louisiana Purchase, and who envisioned a nation of independent farmers and citizens free from tyranny. When Felix Schlag submitted his design, he could not have imagined that his coin would remain in circulation for decades. His vision of Jefferson's portrait facing left, gazing toward the horizon and Monticello on. The reverse would come to symbolize not only Jefferson himself, but also the continuity of the American Republic and the values it stood for as the years passed. The Jefferson Nickel would see minor adjustments, but its essence remained, and by the year 1972, the coin was firmly entrenched in the fabric of American daily life.